A sudden noise in the night can make your own home feel alien. Long before modern horror, the Celts had a name for the dread that lurks in the shadows of a silent house, the original Boogeyman of their folklore. This is the Bodach, a shadowy figure whispered about for generations to keep children from misbehaving. By the end of this, you will understand the true nature of this domestic terror and the ancient fears it represents. We will uncover where this creature hides and explore the chilling possibility that these stories were born from something more than just imagination. What kind of fear takes root inside the walls of a home? The name Bodach itself is a whisper of contradiction. Translated directly from Scottish Gaelic and Irish, it simply means an old man or a churl, a word for a rustic peasant. But in the hushed tones of folklore, that simple meaning curdles into something far more unsettling. This was never a term of endearment for a kindly grandfather. A churl implied coarseness, a lack of refinement, and a potential for rudeness that bordered on menace. So when the Celts spoke of a Bodach visiting a home, they were not describing a human elder. They were invoking the idea of an old, powerful being from outside the community, one untouched by human civility. Its age suggested not frailty, but an ancient, otherworldly strength accumulated over centuries. The name is a perfect disguise, taking a familiar, almost harmless concept and twisting it into a vessel for our deepest domestic fears. This creature wears the skin of a man, but it is fundamentally, terrifyingly something else. This domestic terror finds its home within your home. The Bodach is not a creature of the deep woods or misty moors. It is a being of the threshold, a presence that slips across the boundary of the wild and into the very heart of your sanctuary. Its preferred territories are the spaces built by human hands, but left to the quiet dominion of dust and shadow. An old, isolated farmhouse standing alone against the wind is a perfect haven. A crumbling castle keep with its labyrinth of forgotten passages offers endless hiding places. Even a simple, thatched cottage with its dark corners and low, creaking beams can become his domain. He is the ultimate uninvited guest, a permanent resident you never agreed to host. The Bodach does not simply visit. He takes up residence. He finds the spaces you have abandoned, the rooms you no longer use. The attic, stuffed with memories and shrouded in cobwebs, becomes his watchtower. The cellar, with its damp earth smell and profound silence, serves as his root cellar. A disused bedroom, a cramped space under the stairs, any dark corner where light and life have retreated. These are the places he claims as his own, and there he waits. He is not a restless spirit pacing the halls. His is a patient, ancient stillness. He becomes part of the house itself, listening to the rhythms of the family, learning the sound of every footstep. He waits for the moment of vulnerability, for the deep silence of the night when the fire burns low and the household is asleep. That is his moment to stir from the shadows, to make his presence known with a sudden, inexplicable creak on the stair, a cold draft where there should be none, or the faint, unsettling sensation of being watched from a darkened doorway. His power comes from this invasion, from turning the safest place you know into a landscape of quiet dread. So what form does this patient, waiting dread take when it finally chooses to reveal itself? The Bodach is the shape of an old man, but one twisted and hollowed by the passage of countless years. He is unnaturally tall and gaunt, his frame stooped as if perpetually navigating the low ceilings of human dwellings. His limbs are elongated and thin, ending in hands with long, gnarled fingers that seem more like roots or claws tipped with sharp, dirty nails. These are not the hands of a laborer, but of something that has been clinging to dark places for a very long time. He is clad in tattered, dark clothing, garments that are less fabric and more shadows and dust, clinging to his thin body like a second skin of decay. But it is his face that holds the true horror, a visage of ancient malevolence. His skin is drawn tight over sharp bones, and his mouth is a lipless gash. And his eyes, they are not the cloudy eyes of human old age. They are piercing, intelligent, and filled with a cold, knowing light. In the absolute dark of a moonless night, from the depths of a shadowed corner, those eyes glow with a faint, sickly luminescence. This is not the comforting glow of a candle, but the cold light of something that sees perfectly in the blackness, something that has been watching you all along. The entire aura of the creature is one of profound decay and menace, a walking embodiment of the rot that can infest a forgotten space, given form and a cruel, patient consciousness. That piercing gaze from the shadows is not idle. The Bodach is a creature of purpose, and his methods are a masterclass in psychological terror. He does not burst into rooms with a roar. His power lies in the subtle, in the violation of safety itself. His primary targets are the most vulnerable in the home, the children, and his entire existence serves as a dark lesson in obedience. Parents would whisper his name as the ultimate deterrent. Finish your chores or the Bodach will hear. Do not venture into that empty room after dark, for that is where he waits. Be quiet and go to sleep, or you might attract his attention. He was the folkloric enforcement mechanism, a spectral lawman for the household, and his jurisdiction was every dark, forgotten space a child feared. He was the thing hiding under the bed, the source of the rustle from inside the closet. On a stormy night, the scratching at the window pane was not the branch of a tree, but the sound of his long, gnarled fingers dragging across the glass. These were not just random noises. They were his way of reminding you that he was always there, just on the other side of the thin walls of civilization, listening and watching. But the most terrifying aspect of his legend was the ultimate punishment for those who failed to heed the warnings. A truly disobedient, troublesome child risked more than just a fright. The stories tell that the Bodach would snatch such children away. He would drag them from their beds, pulling them into the closets or from under the stairs, not to some physical lair, but into his own shadowy realm. This was not a place that could be found on any map. It was a dimension of perpetual twilight and silence, a space between the walls where the snatched child would be lost forever, never to be seen again by their family. This fate was the core of his function. He was not merely a monster. He was a consequence, a chilling reminder that the security of the home was a fragile thing, and that bad behavior could tear a hole in that safety, allowing the ancient darkness from outside to pour in and take you away. This spectral enforcement was never limited to the nursery. While children were his primary cautionary tale, the Bodach's jurisdiction extended to every member of the household, holding adults to an even stricter account. He was the ancient conscience of the community, a grim corrector of social and moral failings. Tales abound of the Bodach visiting his displeasure upon a lazy farmer who let his fields go to weed and his roof fall into disrepair. Such a man might wake to find his tools scattered, his livestock unsettled, or the eerie sound of dragging footsteps circling his property all night, a relentless auditory torment until he mended his ways. A merchant known for using false weights or selling spoiled goods could find his shop in disarray each morning, his carefully stacked goods knocked over and a lingering, cold presence that drove customers away. The Bodach punished those who broke the sacred trust of the home as well. A son who disrespects his elders or a spouse who neglects their family might be plagued by a constant, unsettling feeling of being watched. A shadow that moved just at the edge of their vision, a profound chill that settled in their very bones no matter how high they stoked the fire. His judgment was swift, psychological, and inescapable. He did not merely frighten these adults, he shamed them, using their own guilt and fear as his tools, forcing a confrontation with their own shortcomings. In a world without a formal police force, the Bodach was the supernatural enforcer of the unwritten rules, the one who ensured that the community's values of hard work, honesty, and familial duty were upheld. His presence in folklore answered a deep human need for cosmic justice, for the assurance that wrongs would be noticed and corrected, even if by a creature of shadow. This shadowy enforcer of domestic order was not a singular entity. As the tales of the Bodach traveled across the misty hills and through the deep glens of the Celtic world, his nature shifted and evolved, taking on distinct local flavors. In Scotland, the name itself remained the same, but the creature often manifested with a slightly more agricultural bent. Here, we find the Bodachan Sabhale, the little old man of the barn. This figure was less a kidnapper of children and more a guardian of rural property. A farmer who treated his animals poorly or left his grain to rot might find the Bodachan Sabhale actively sabotaging his work, tangling the harnesses or scattering the feed. He was a spirit of strict, practical justice. His malevolence focused on the preservation of the farm's livelihood rather than the terrorizing of its young. He was still a figure to be feared, but his purpose was tied directly to the land and its bounty. Across the water in Ireland, however, the Bodach's character curdled into something darker and more personally vindictive. The Irish Bodach shed much of that agricultural oversight, becoming a more concentrated embodiment of domestic dread. His connection to the home was not about protecting its resources, but about invading its peace. While other Celtic household spirits, like the Scottish brownie or the English hob, could be mischievous but ultimately helpful if respected, the Irish Bodach offered no such bargain. There was no winning his favor with a bowl of cream or a warm spot by the fire. His presence was almost universally one of ill omen, a chilling portent that fed on fear itself. This unique malevolence sets him apart. He is not a spirit you can appease, only one you hope to avoid. His haunting is not a negotiation, but a sentence, a constant reminder that the safety of your own hearth is nothing more than an illusion, one that a gaunt, old man from the shadows is always waiting to shatter. This unique domestic malevolence finds echoes in dark figures across the globe. From the deep forests of Slavic lands comes Baba Yaga, a witch who dwells in a hut that walks on chicken legs. She too is used to frighten children into obedience, but her domain is the untamed wilderness, a world away from civilization. She represents the dangers outside the village walls. The German Der Schwarzmann, the Black Man, is another spectral disciplinarian who punishes misbehaving children, often by stuffing them into his sack. Yet he is often a more abstract figure of the night, not a permanent resident of the home. Perhaps the most striking parallel is the Arabic Abu Rigel Masluka, whose name means the man with the burnt leg. This creature hides under beds or in dark corners, using his terrifying, burned appearance to scare children who stay up past their bedtime. The similarity is uncanny, a gaunt, shadowy figure using fear to enforce a household rule. But here lies the critical difference that defines the Bodach. While these other Boogeymen are visitors who come from the outside, the Bodach never leaves. He is not a traveler from a distant forest or a burner of deserts. His essence is the house itself. He is the creak in the floorboard you cannot explain, the cold spot in the hallway, the feeling that the very shadows in the corner are watching you. He does not need to arrive with a sack or a threat, because his greatest power is his constant, patient presence. He is the fear that the safety of your own home is an illusion, and that the darkness you thought you locked out at night has been living in your attic all along. But where did such a uniquely invasive terror truly come from? To understand the Bodach, we must look deeper than the fairy tales and venture into the realm of lost beliefs. Many folklorists see in his shadow the ghost of something far older, a pre-Christian household spirit whose role was twisted by time. Before churches stood in the glens, the ancient Celts and the peoples before them likely believed in domestic deities, spirits that guarded the hearth and the family line. These were not monsters, but powerful ancestral presences that demanded respect. They were the genius loci, the spirit of the place itself. Imagine a stone idol kept by the fireplace, representing a founding ancestor who watched over the home. Offerings of food and drink would be left to ensure his continued favor, a pact between the living family and the protective dead. But what happens when a new religion arrives, one that labels all such spirits as demons? The kindly household god is recast. His protective watchfulness becomes a sinister surveillance. His demand for respect becomes a threat of punishment. The ancestral guardian is slowly, over generations of whispered stories, transformed into the Bodach, a demonized version of his former self. His ancient power remains, but its purpose is inverted from protection to persecution. This figure is no longer a revered grandfather spirit, but a crotchety, dangerous old man from a forgotten age, resentful of being abandoned. He is the memory of a forgotten god, now haunting the homes that once worshipped him. His lingering presence in the attic is a folk memory of the idol that once sat in a place of honor, now banished to the darkness. Another chilling theory suggests the Bodach is a folk memory of a very real human threat. In the turbulent times of early Celtic societies, a remote farmstead was incredibly vulnerable. A raid from a hostile neighboring tribe was a constant, terrifying possibility. The figure of a gaunt, menacing old man appearing at the door could be a folkloric echo of that specific dread. He is the stranger from the wilderness, the outsider who brings violence to your threshold. Over centuries, the specific historical trauma of tribal warfare fades, but the primal fear of invasion crystallizes into a single, supernatural shape, the Bodach. He becomes the eternal representation of that hostile stranger, forever waiting in the dark corners of the home, a permanent reminder of the time when your door was not a guarantee of safety, but a fragile barrier against the dangers of the world. This gives the creature a profound archaeological depth, rooting him not in fantasy, but in the collective trauma of a people. He is more than a story to scare children. He is the lingering echo of ancient fears, a fossil of forgotten faiths and historical nightmares, given a gaunt face and a cold, watching gaze. There is a tale from County Kerry that was told to ensure no child ever strayed too far into the bog after dark. It involves a young boy named Ewan, known throughout the village for his stubbornness and his refusal to heed his mother's warnings. His chore was to bring the family's single cow back from the common grazing land each evening before the sun dipped below the hills. But Ewan, captivated by his own games, often lingered until the last possible moment, ignoring his mother's pleas about the Bodach that was said to dwell in the old peat stacks. One evening, his defiance reached its peak. The sun vanished and a thick grey mist rolled in from the Atlantic, swallowing the path home. Ewan, finally feeling a prick of fear, pulled the cow by its rope and started through the gloom. It was then he heard it, a sound separate from the squelch of his own boots, a slow, dragging step behind him. He glanced back and saw nothing but the shifting mist. He quickened his pace, his heart beginning to drum against his ribs. The sound kept pace, a relentless scrape and drag, always just a few steps behind. He dared not look again, pulling the frightened cow faster. As he reached the stone wall that bordered his family's cottage, a long, shadowy arm reached from the mist and clamped onto the rope just behind his hand. The grip was iron. Ewan froze, his breath catching in his throat, and slowly turned his head. Towering over him was the gaunt figure of the Bodach, its tattered clothes damp with fog, its eyes glowing with that faint, sickly light. The creature did not speak. It simply pointed a long, gnarled finger toward the cottage door, its meaning terrifyingly clear. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it melted back into the mist, leaving Ewan trembling and alone, the cow lowing in distress. From that night on, Ewan was the first child home each evening, his defiance utterly broken. He never saw the Bodach again, but he always felt the weight of its gaze from the dark places, a permanent reminder that the rules of the home were not just his mother's, but were enforced by something far older and far less forgiving. This psychological power was the true genius of the Bodach, a tool of social control sharpened over centuries. Long before child psychology or structured discipline, parents wielded these stories as their most effective means of ensuring a child's safety and conformity. The world was a physically dangerous place, with open hearths, deep wells, and treacherous bogs posing constant threats. A simple command to stay away from the old well might be forgotten, but the warning that the Bodach lurked in its damp darkness, waiting to pull in the curious, was unforgettable. These tales translated abstract dangers into a tangible, terrifying presence that a child could visualize and fear. The stories were not merely about scaring children into submission. They were a primal form of risk management, using the language of nightmare to enforce the rules of survival. The fear they instilled was a practical, life-saving fear. Do not wander off or the Bodach will take you. Do not play near the cliff edge for he waits below. The creature became the embodiment of every potential consequence, a supernatural enforcer of the most crucial earthly rules. Why were these stories so profoundly effective where simple commands failed? They tapped directly into the deepest layers of a child's psyche. A child's imagination is a vivid, literal landscape, and the Bodach provided a concrete shape for the formless anxieties of the dark, of separation, and of the unknown. The threat of being snatched away was not just a punishment, it was the ultimate psychological terror, the fear of complete and irreversible alienation from the safety of home and family. This was far more terrifying than a scolding or a slap. It weaponized a child's own imagination against them, creating a self-regulating system of behavior. The child, left alone in the dark, would now police their own actions, their mind conjuring the gaunt figure in the shadows, ensuring they stayed in bed, did not make a noise or venture where they were forbidden. The Bodach was always there, a perpetual witness, making disobedience feel not just wrong but perilous. This internalized fear was far more efficient than any parent's watchful eye could ever be. Furthermore, these stories served a vital function for the entire community, reinforcing a shared set of values and ensuring its continuity. In an oral culture, folklore was the bedrock of education, and the Bodach was a central character in this moral curriculum. The tales taught respect for elders, the importance of hard work, and the sacred duty of upholding family and community obligations. A story about a lazy farmer tormented by the creature was not just a ghost story, it was a lesson in social responsibility broadcast around the fire. Everyone, from the youngest child to the most seasoned adult, understood the consequences of stepping outside these accepted norms. The Bodach was a collective construct, a shared nightmare that bound the community together with a common understanding of right and wrong, and a unified fear of the consequences for transgressing them. He was the dark guardian of tradition, ensuring that the old ways and the hard-earned wisdom of the community were passed down, not through gentle encouragement, but through chilling, unforgettable narratives. In this way, the fear he inspired was the glue that held the social order together, a necessary darkness that preserved the light of the community for generations. This fear of being snatched from your own home connects to one of the most chilling beliefs in all of Celtic folklore, the concept of the changeling. Across Ireland and Scotland, parents lived in dread that the fairy folk, the owl's she, would steal a healthy human baby and leave a sickly, wailing fairy child in its place. This swapped child, the changeling, would then drain the life and happiness from a family. But the stories rarely specify who exactly carried out this terrible exchange. The question lingers in the cold air of an old cottage. Who is the fairy kingdom's designated kidnapper? The haunting profile of the Bodach fits this role with terrifying precision. He is already established as a creature who invades the home and snatches the disobedient. It is a small, sinister step to imagine him as the primary agent of the fairies, the long-fingered hand that reaches into the cradle. His method of operation is identical. He operates in the deep night, crossing the threshold without a sound. His targets are the most vulnerable. His purpose is to enforce a grim, otherworldly law, reminding humans of their subservience to the powerful, hidden world of the she. Connecting the Bodach to changeling lore weaves him even deeper into the Celtic psyche. He is no longer just a disciplinary figure for unruly children, but a key operative in the fairies' Cold War against humanity. He becomes the reason a mother would hang iron scissors over the cradle, for iron was known to repel the fairies and by extension their gaunt emissary. He is the reason specific protective charms were whispered over an infant. The fear was not an abstract worry about fairies, but a concrete terror that the Bodach, the silent resident of the shadows, would fulfill his most dreadful function and leave a wasting, crying imposter in place of a beloved child. This potential link transforms the creature. He is the bridge between the domestic horror of a child's misbehavior and the cosmic horror of a supernatural conspiracy against your family line. He is the embodiment of the fear that the very future of your household, your child, could be stolen away and replaced by something alien, all by the same patient, watching presence you thought was just a story to ensure good behavior. That silent, watching presence rarely announces itself with a grand spectacle. Its power lies in the subtle, the almost imperceptible details that slowly erode your sense of security. So how would you know if the Bodach has taken up residence in your home? The signs are there for those who know how to read the quiet language of a haunted house. The first and most common omen is a sudden, inexplicable cold spot. You might be walking from one room to another and pass through a pocket of air so frigid it raises the hairs on your arm. A chill that has nothing to do with a drafty window and everything to do with a presence drawing warmth from the very atmosphere. This cold is not merely an absence of heat. It feels ancient and damp like the air from a long-sealed tomb. Another telltale sign is the mysterious displacement of small objects. A spoon you left on the table is now on the floor. A book is tilted on its shelf. These are not the chaotic results of a poltergeist, but small, deliberate adjustments, as if someone or something is constantly rearranging your belongings when you are not looking, asserting its ownership over the space. Then there are the sounds, the auditory evidence that chills the blood. In the deep silence of the night, when every creak of the house is amplified, you might hear it, the slow, deliberate sound of dragging footsteps. It is not the brisk walk of a living person, but a sluggish, scraping gait, as if something with heavy, unwilling feet is pacing the hallway upstairs or shuffling across the attic floor directly above your head. Perhaps the most reliable indicator, however, comes from the most perceptive members of the household, the family pets. A dog might suddenly freeze in the middle of a room, its head cocked, a low growl rumbling in its throat as it stares fixedly at an empty corner. A cat might arch its back, hiss at a closed door, or refuse to enter a room it normally frequents. Animals, with their sharper senses, seem to perceive the Bodach directly, reacting to a shape or a scent that remains invisible to human eyes. They are the early warning system, their fear a confirmation that the unease you feel is not your imagination. When the dog whimpers and hides under the table for no reason, and the temperature in the kitchen drops 10 degrees, and you hear that faint scraping from the cellar, the pieces of the puzzle lock into place. You are not alone in your home. You are sharing it with something that has been there much, much longer. But a home was not a helpless place waiting for this ancient dread to claim it. The same folk tradition that gave the Bodach his power also provided a detailed arsenal of defenses, a collection of rituals and charms passed down through generations to fortify the hearth against his intrusion. The most potent and widespread of these protections was cold iron, a simple horseshoe nailed over the main doorway, its ends pointing upward to hold in the luck, was a powerful ward. Even an old iron nail driven into the windowsill or a kitchen knife placed beneath a child's cradle was believed to be enough to bar his entry. The reasoning was ancient and deeply rooted. Iron was the material of human industry and progress, the very substance that had tamed the wilderness. To the old, magical beings of the earth like the Bodach, it was anathema, a poison that burned their essence and broke their spells. It represented the modern world encroaching on their ancient domain, a force they could not abide. Another powerful symbol was the St. Bridget's cross, woven from rushes or straw and hung above the door, especially at the festival of Imbolc. This was not just a Christian emblem, it was a much older symbol of the sun, a charm of protection and blessing that predated the church, adopted and sanctified by the new faith. Its presence at the threshold was a declaration that the home was under divine and cosmic protection, a radiant shield against the shadowy things that creep in the dark. For those who believed the Bodach might be a disgruntled household spirit, appeasement was another strategy. A small saucer of fresh milk or a crust of bread would be left on the hearthstone or on the kitchen table overnight. This was not an act of worship, but a gesture of respect, a quiet bargain with the unseen forces of the home. It was a way of saying, "We acknowledge your presence, here is a token, now leave us in peace." And if these passive defenses failed, there were more active measures. Specific Gaelic prayers and charms, known only to certain families or local wise women, could be spoken aloud to banish the creature. These were not casual pleas, but formal, rhythmic incantations, words believed to carry inherent power. A mother might whisper such a charm over her sleeping children, her words weaving an invisible barrier around their beds. The head of the household might walk the perimeter of his property at dusk, reciting the old words to sanctify the boundary and forbid the Bodach from crossing it. These practices formed a complete system of home defense, blending the physical with the spiritual, the Christian with the pagan. They were a testament to a deep-seated belief that the safety of the home was not a given, but a state that required constant, vigilant maintenance against the ancient shadows that forever pressed in at the edges. Yet even this ancient, patient presence has its vulnerabilities, its own deep-seated fears that offer a glimmer of hope to those who know the old rules. The Bodach is fundamentally a creature of shadow and silence, and his greatest weakness is their opposite, the unassailable power of light and sacred sound. Direct sunlight does not merely inconvenience him, it utterly unravels his form. The first rays of dawn striking the windowsill of a room he inhabits will force him to retreat, his shadowy substance dissolving back into the dark corners from which he came. This is why his activities are confined to the deepest night, for the sun represents a purity and a life force that his ancient, decaying nature cannot endure. Similarly, the resonant peal of church bells carried on the wind can clear a house of his presence for days. The sound is not just noise, it is a wave of sanctified order crashing against the chaotic darkness he represents. It is a declaration that the modern, structured world of faith holds dominion, and his kind, born from older, wilder beliefs, must yield. This vulnerability extends to the people within the home. A person of genuinely pure heart, often a small child untouched by guile or an adult known for their unwavering kindness and courage, carries an innate protection. The Bodach cannot bear to be near such unwavering light. His malevolence withers in the face of true innocence or selfless love, finding no purchase in a spirit that offers no fear or moral failing to exploit. But perhaps the most potent weapon against him is the power of his own name. To look into the shadows and boldly speak the name Bodach is to strip him of his mystery and power. In the oldest magical traditions, to know a being's true name is to exert control over it. By naming him, you are no longer a frightened victim cowering before an unknown terror. You are acknowledging him as a known entity, a classified threat with defined weaknesses. This act of courage, of standing your ground and speaking his name aloud, can be enough to banish him back into the silence, a powerful reminder that even the most terrifying darkness can be pushed back by the simple, defiant act of bringing it into the light. Yet the Bodach has not faded into the pages of history. This ancient fear continues to find form in the modern world, its gaunt silhouette glimpsed in the glow of a smartphone or captured in the static of a digital recording. Paranormal investigation teams armed with EVP detectors and thermal cameras now venture into old farmhouses where families once whispered warnings. Time and again, in audio reviews from such locations, a common, chilling sound emerges from the background noise, the slow, unmistakable drag of a footstep where no one stands. Homeowners report the same classic signs: a persistent cold spot in a new apartment, the family dog growling at a vacant closet, small personal items vanishing from a locked drawer only to reappear days later in plain sight. These are not the grand hauntings of cinema, but the quiet, intimate intrusions that have always defined this creature. The language used by those who experience it is strikingly consistent, even across centuries. They do not describe a ghost, but a presence. They speak of a feeling of being watched by something old, something that does not belong, yet acts as if it has every right to be there. The fear is not of a violent attack, but of a permanent, unwelcome cohabitation, a violation of privacy that echoes the oldest Celtic tales. Why does this specific archetype of the domestic intruder remain so potent in an age of electric light and instant communication? The answer lies in the very nature of modern life. Our homes are more sealed and secure than ever, yet we are more isolated within them. We live in a world of digital networks, but the ancient, primal fear of something physical lurking just beyond the circle of light is a terror that technology cannot erase. The Bodach is the perfect vessel for this contemporary anxiety. He represents the ultimate breach of our personal space, the silent hacker of our domestic serenity. He is the shape we give to the fear that our most advanced locks and alarms cannot protect us from the things that were already inside, waiting in the spaces we never think to check. He thrives not in spite of our modernity, but because of it, his ancient stillness providing a terrifying counterpoint to our frantic, connected lives. His enduring presence in our stories is a testament to a fear that is fundamentally human, a dread that no amount of progress can fully illuminate the dark corner in your own hallway. This quiet dread did not remain confined to the hearthside. The Bodach, that patient shadow in the corner of the Celtic mind, eventually stepped out of oral tradition and onto the printed page, his gaunt form finding a new home in literature. Irish author John Connolly, in his haunting novel The Book of Lost Things, masterfully captures the creature's essence. He does not present a cartoonish monster, but a being of profound and ancient malice, a perfect representation of the childhood fears that stalk his young protagonist. Connolly's Bodach is a thing of tattered black coats and a chilling, unnatural stillness, a direct literary descendant of the folkloric terror, but the influence extends beyond direct adaptation. The entire archetype of the sinister, ancient being that invades the domestic sphere, enforcing its own grim rules, can be seen in other fantasy greats. While not named a Bodach, the faceless, shadowy dementors from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series serve a strikingly similar function. They are not just guards of Azkaban, they are creatures that feed on joy, that create despair, and whose very presence brings an unnatural cold and the sensation of never being happy again. They are the Bodach's psychological terror amplified, the same dread of a permanent, chilling presence that saps the warmth and safety from a world. Similarly, the grim, unyielding, and ancient Tom Bombadil from Tolkien's Legendarium, while a benevolent force, shares the Bodach's quality of being an primordial being utterly indifferent to the rules and concerns of the world around him, a reminder of powers that were old before the first houses were built. What these literary translations prove is the incredible versatility of the folkloric blueprint. Authors recognized that the Bodach was more than a simple ghost story. He was a powerful symbol. He could represent the trauma of childhood, the weight of depression, or the cold indifference of the universe to human happiness. By adapting him or the fears he embodies, these writers connect their modern stories to that deep, ancient well of collective fear, granting their narratives an instant, visceral resonance. The creature's journey from a whispered name in a Gaelic cottage to a figure in international bestsellers shows that our need to give a shape to the thing watching us from the dark is a story that never truly ends. Cinematic shadows have given the Bodach a new kind of life, translating whispered fears into visual horror. While the name itself is rarely spoken on screen, the creature's essence, that of a gaunt, patient intruder, haunt some of our most memorable modern ghost stories. One of the most faithful adaptations emerges not from a Celtic production, but from Japanese horror. The 2002 film The Grudge features an entity known as Kayako, a vengeful spirit whose movements are defined by a disturbing, broken crawl and a guttural death rattle. Kayako is not an old man, yet she embodies the core Bodach principle of the permanent, unwelcome resident. She does not merely haunt a house, she is the house, her presence infecting the very walls and waiting for new occupants to violate its cursed silence. Her slow, dragging ascent up the stairs is a direct visual parallel to the folklore's description of the dragging footsteps from the attic, a perfect cinematic representation of that relentless, shuffling dread. This cross-cultural translation proves the universal power of the archetype, the fear of a presence that has claimed your space as its own. Other films explore the Bodach's role as a punisher of moral failings, though they often amplify the violence for dramatic effect. The 2007 movie The Boogeyman, while using the more general American name, presents a creature that is summoned by the fear of a child and then preys upon an entire family. This being operates from the shadows of a closet, snatching its victims away, mirroring the Bodach's legendary punishment for the disobedient. However, the cinematic Boogeyman is often a more actively malevolent force, one that physically attacks and kills, whereas the traditional Bodach's power was more psychological, relying on terror and the threat of abduction. This shift from psychological torment to physical violence is a common creative liberty, making the unseen dread into a tangible, monstrous antagonist the audience can see and flee from. It trades the slow burn of domestic unease for the immediate payoff of a jump scare. Television, with its longer format, has sometimes delved deeper into the creature's folkloric roots. The series Supernatural featured numerous entities based on global myths, and its interpretation of a Bodach retained several key traits. In one episode, the creature is depicted as a shadowy, ancient being that feeds on fear and terrorizes families, often focusing on children. It is a stalker from the dark corners of the home, a clear nod to the original folklore. Yet, to fit the show's monster of the weak structure, the Bodach is given a specific physical weakness and a method for being killed, something entirely absent from the old tales where such creatures were banished by light or faith, not destroyed by a silver dagger. This need to provide a concrete solution for the heroes reflects a fundamental difference in how modern storytelling handles ancient fears, often seeking to conquer them outright rather than simply learning to keep them at bay. Perhaps the most widespread, albeit loose, interpretation of the Bodach's function can be found in the world of animation, specifically in the Monsters, Inc. universe. While designed for comedy, the characters of Mike and Sully are professional scarers whose entire job is to enter the human world through closet doors to harvest the screams of children. This cleverly inverts the folklore, making the monsters the organized workers and the children's fear a valuable resource. Yet the basic framework remains eerily familiar, a monstrous figure emerging from a closet door in the dead of night to frighten a child in their own bedroom. The film sanitizes the terror and gives it a happy ending, but it directly plays upon the same primal childhood fear that the Bodach stories were created to exploit. The fear of what might be waiting in that dark space behind the closet door when the lights go out. These varied screen adaptations demonstrate that while filmmakers might alter the specifics, the underlying dread the Bodach represents is timeless. His journey from the peat fires of old cottages to the flickering light of a television screen proves that we are still trying to give a name and a face to the shadow in the corner of our modern rooms. Perhaps the true power of the Bodach lies not in his claws or his shadowy form, but in his perfect reflection of our own anxieties. Viewed through a modern lens, this creature is far more than a fairy tale monster. He is a powerful symbol of the universal fears that reside within the human psyche, especially the fear of the unknown within our own supposedly safe spaces. His essence is the dread of the dark, not the manageable dark of a city night. but the absolute suffocating blackness of a power outage in a remote house. He gives a shape to the formless worry that the world is not a benevolent place, that malevolent forces, both human and supernatural, exist just beyond the thin veneer of our control. This is why his story remains so chillingly relatable centuries after it was first whispered. We may have replaced the peat fire with electric light, but we have not eliminated the primal jump of the heart when the floor creaks unexpectedly in the night. The Bodach is that jump given a name and a face. He personifies the specific modern terror of a home invasion, the violation of our most private sanctuary by an intelligence that wishes us harm. In an age of locked doors and security systems, he represents the chilling possibility that the threat is not outside trying to get in, but is already inside waiting. He is the manifestation of our anxiety about things we cannot see, cannot understand, and ultimately cannot control. His patient watching from the shadows mirrors our own subconscious vigilance, that part of our mind that never fully switches off, that listens for the unusual sound, that questions the small, out-of-place detail. The Bodach is the externalization of our internal alarm system, a folkloric embodiment of the low-grade, persistent fear that the safety we work so hard to build is ultimately an illusion, perpetually vulnerable to the ancient, silent things that predate our walls and our peace of mind. To truly grasp the Bodach's unique menace, we must place him beside another legendary spectre, the Banshee. Where the Banshee is a herald, the Bodach is an executioner. A Banshee's role is one of sorrowful announcement. She appears to certain old Irish families, her mournful wail echoing through the night not to cause a death, but to foretell its imminent arrival. Her presence is a warning, a supernatural signal of a natural, impending end. She is tied to bloodlines, a fixture of family history who laments the passing of her own. Her grief is genuine, even if its sound chills the soul. The Bodach, in stark contrast, is not a messenger. He is the source of the terror itself. He does not warn of a punishment, he is the punishment. His presence is not a signal of something to come. It is the active, malicious event. He is not bound by family lineage, but by moral failing. He targets anyone who breaks the social code, from the lazy farmer to the disobedient child. While the Banshee mourns a fate she does not control, the Bodach actively orchestrates the consequences. He is the grim corrector, the supernatural enforcer who ensures the rules are not just heard but obeyed. This distinction places them on entirely different levels of the supernatural hierarchy. The Banshee operates on a plane of destiny and lineage, a passive observer of a fate she announces. The Bodach operates on a plane of immediate, interactive justice. He is not watching the story unfold. He is the antagonist writing it, a malevolent agent who invades your home and actively shapes your reality through fear and direct action. One is a voice from the outside, mourning a loss. The other is a hand from within the shadows, reaching out to create one. The line between a whispered myth and a half-remembered history is often thinner than we suppose. Could the gaunt figure of the Bodach be a folk memory, a ghost story born from the genuine, bone-deep fears of a vulnerable society? One compelling theory suggests this creature is the echo of a very real human threat, the scavenging outlaw or the desperate wandering beggar. In the isolated, wind-scoured farmsteads of the Celtic world, a knock on the door after dark was not a friendly visit. It could be a desperate soul, gaunt from hunger, their eyes hollowed by hardship, seeking food or shelter by any means necessary. These figures, pushed to the fringes of society, were often feared as much as any spirit. Their appearance was unsettling, their motives unknown, and their potential for violence a constant, unspoken dread. Over generations, the specific memory of a threatening stranger would fade, but the primal fear of the hostile outsider would remain, crystallizing into the single, supernatural shape of the Bodach. He becomes the eternal representation of that knock on the door, the face at the window, the stranger whose arrival spells trouble. Another, even darker, possibility points to the survivors of ancient, brutal conflicts. In the wake of clan warfare or Viking raids, the landscape would have been littered with the displaced and the broken. Men who had lost everything, their minds shattered by trauma, might have become wild figures living in the wilderness and scavenging from remote homes. These individuals, ostracized and feared by the community, would have been seen as less than human, their very presence a reminder of the violence that had shattered the peace. The Bodach, with his ancient, weary malevolence and his tattered, dark clothing, fits the profile of such a survivor, a living ghost from a traumatic past haunting the present. This adds a profound layer of historical plausibility to the legend. The creature is not a random invention of fantasy, but a fossilized memory of collective trauma. His patience and his residence within the home itself could stem from tales of outlaws who secretly took refuge in a family's barn or attic, their presence only betrayed by a creak on the stair or a missing scrap of food. The fear was not just of a monster, but of the very real human desperation that could lurk in the shadows of your own property. This theory grounds the Bodach in the harsh realities of survival, transforming him from a simple fairy tale into a somber monument to a time when the world was a far more dangerous and uncertain place, and the greatest terror was not a creature of magic, but the desperate stranger from the wild, whose eyes held the cold light of starvation and despair. Artistic visions of the Bodach reveal how each era projects its own deepest fears onto his shadowy form. Early woodcuts from the 17th and 18th centuries depicted him not as a fully defined monster, but as a disturbing absence of light. These crude, powerful images showed a gaunt silhouette emerging from a cellar doorway or a hunched figure composed of wood grain and shadow, his eyes often the only distinct feature, carved as two white, staring circles in a field of black. The artists of this time used the limitations of their medium to their advantage, the rough lines and heavy cross-hatching creating a texture of pure gloom that suggested his form was more shadow than substance. He was often placed in domestic settings, his elongated fingers reaching from under a bed or his stooped head peering over a rooftop, emphasizing his intimate, invasive presence within the human world. The lack of fine detail was the point. It forced the viewer's imagination to complete the horror, to fill in the terrifying specifics of that faceless dark. As printing technology advanced into the Victorian era, illustrations became more detailed, but the core dread remained. Now, the Bodach was often rendered with the emaciated, tortured anatomy found in medical textbooks of the age, his ribs protruding and his limbs twisted like old roots, a clear reflection of the period's fascination with decay and anatomical precision. He was the ultimate degenerate, a figure from a Darwinian nightmare, his ancientness interpreted as a form of physical and moral atrophy. The tattered clothing of folklore became the ragged robes of a grave shroud, tying him to the era's pervasive obsession with death and mourning. These images cemented his appearance as not just a ghost, but a corporeal, albeit decaying, being, making his invasion of the home feel all the more physically threatening. The jump to modern digital art has allowed for a new kind of terrifying immersion. Contemporary artists use tools to create Bodach that are unnervingly fluid, creatures of living smoke and shifting darkness. They can render that signature sickly glow in his eyes as a pulsating, ethereal light, and animate the slow, dragging footsteps into a spine-chilling video loop. The common motifs, however, are unshakable: the unnatural height, the gnarled hands, the piercing eyes, and the stooped posture are all faithfully maintained across centuries of interpretation. This consistency proves that the folkloric blueprint captured something essential, a primal fear of the gaunt, watching stranger that resonates regardless of the medium. The evolution is not in the core horror, but in the texture of it, from the suggestive shadow of a woodcut to the high-definition, animated menace that can stalk the very screen you are watching him on. So let us turn this ancient fear into a creative spark. If the Bodach were to take up residence in your own life, what shape would his judgment take? Think about the small, modern failings that might attract his attention. Would he be the consequence for the chronic procrastinator, the one who always promises to start tomorrow? Imagine him as a patient weight in the shadows of the home office, his presence a constant cold pressure until that neglected project is finally completed. Or perhaps your personal Bodach punishes a different kind of sin, the poison of endless gossip shared over digital networks. This version might not hide under the stairs, but in the silent spaces between notifications, his long fingers subtly tangling charger cables and draining batteries as a reminder of misspent words. Where would this creature of your own making choose to dwell? It would not be a dusty attic, but the space you have psychologically abandoned. Perhaps he lurks in the junk drawer, overflowing with broken promises and forgotten intentions, or in the silent, accusing glare of the unread books on your shelf. Maybe his domain is the dark, silent corner of the garage where half-finished hobbies gather dust, a monument to ambitions left to wither. The true power of this exercise is not just in crafting a monster, but in uncovering the quiet, unspoken rules you believe are worth enforcing. What modern value is so important that breaking it would summon a spectral corrector into your world? Is it the virtue of presence punished by a Bodach who makes your screens flicker and die whenever you ignore the people in the room with you? Is it the principle of authenticity with a creature that feeds on the unease you feel after presenting a false version of yourself online? By designing your own Bodach, you are participating in the same tradition that kept children from the well and farmers attentive to their fields. You are defining your own personal folklore, giving a name and a face to the consequences of straying from your own moral compass. This is how these stories lived and breathed for centuries, not as rigid myths, but as adaptable tools for understanding the world and our place within it. Your Bodach is waiting in the shadows of your own choices, a silent witness to the rules you dare to break. That chilling sensation you feel when a floorboard creaks is a direct line to our ancestors. The Bodach endures because he is not a simple monster. He is a perfect psychological tool, a vessel for the fears that are fundamental to the human experience. His power lies in his role as a cautionary tale, a story that teaches without needing to lecture. For generations, these legends were a primary method of social education, translating abstract dangers into a tangible, unforgettable presence. The warning not to go near the old well is easily ignored, but the story of the long-fingered Bodach waiting in its damp darkness becomes a mental barrier no child would dare cross. He gave a face and a consequence to the risks of a harsh world, ensuring survival through the power of a well-told nightmare, but his function goes beyond mere instruction. These stories also satisfy a deep, almost primal human craving for the thrill of fear itself. In the safety of a well-lit room, surrounded by family, listening to a tale of the shadow in the corner provides a controlled adrenaline rush. It allows us to dance with terror from a secure distance, to feel the chill down our spine while knowing we are ultimately safe. This is the catharsis of horror, the reason we love ghost stories around a campfire or a scary movie on a dark night. The Bodach offers a safe way to explore our deepest anxieties about the dark, the unknown, and the violation of our personal space. He allows us to confront the idea that our sanctuary might be shared, and to feel that fear in a context where we can still turn on the light and laugh with relief. This combination of practical purpose and emotional release makes his legend incredibly resilient. He is a teacher, a thrill, and a timeless reminder that some fears are so deeply woven into our psyche that they will always demand a shape, a name, and a story to be told. He is the original Boogeyman, a permanent shadow in the corner of your childhood home. The Bodach stands apart in the crowded world of folklore, not as a king of the fairies or a guardian of the wild, but as a deeply domestic terror. His role was always one of enforcement, a disciplinary figure crafted to teach children obedience and adults their social duties through the potent language of fear. He is not a wanderer of moors or forests, but a creature of the threshold, a presence that claims the forgotten spaces within your own walls, the attic and the cellar as his eternal domain. Within the wider tapestry of Celtic mythology, he serves as a grim counterpoint to more majestic beings, a reminder that the most profound horrors are not found in distant realms, but in the quiet, unsettling creak of a floorboard in the dead of night. So the next time your house settles in the darkness and you hear a faint, scratching sound from a place you cannot name, remember the old stories. That might just be the wind, or it could be the sound of long, gnarled fingers patiently waiting in the dark. We would love to hear from you. What was the boogeyman that haunted the stories from your own corner of the world? Share your local legends in the comments below and subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of our collective imagination.